Hey guys, this is Phil from underKG.com, and this is the iPad mini 4. Probably the biggest upgrade since the first iPad mini. I would say that. So the biggest upgrade is not the A8 processor or the 2 GB of RAM, but I would say the display. Since the first generation of the iPad mini, it seems as if Apple deliberately, intentionally tried to put the bad display on the iPad mini. Maybe that was a cost reduction, maybe that was a class distinction, whatever. They put the awful display, I would say. The color gamut was terrible, the sRGB were reproduced terribly on the previous generations, including the iPad mini and the second and third generation. Even after the upgrade to the Retina display on the iPad mini 2, it still was a horrible display in terms of color reproduction, and so was the iPad mini 3 because that was virtually the same device as the iPad mini 2. Now this guy is thinner, slimmer, that's the same thing, and everything better. So let's dive right into it. So in terms of design, it retains the same design language that we've seen with the previous iPad minis and the bigger siblings of the iPad, which I mean the iPad Air, not the iPad Pro. Now when I say big, there's an iPad Pro, so I should be clear about that. So in front, we got that the usual design, nothing biggie changes. The same size of the display, same resolution of the display. It's the same thing except for the thing that the screen is entirely different. So there's a front-facing camera and the fingerprint-enabled home key. On the right, you got the volume rocker with the secondary microphone. On the bottom, you have a pair of stereo speaker and a lightning port, which I presume is going to be replaced with the USB Type-C anytime soon. On top, we got the power key. If you get an LTE-enabled model, you'll have a strip of antenna on top, and there's an earphone jack, which is not my favorite position. I like it on the bottom better, but there's nothing on the left, and that's pretty much it. On the back, there is a camera, which is upgraded in the same time, and a microphone, Apple logo, and the iPad logo, which is in color gold. That was added since the iPad mini 3, and this is by no means my favorite color. I'm getting used to it, but still it's not my favorite. The color isn't exactly accurate on the camera, but this is champagne gold, I should say. That's probably going to be the closest term that you'll find in the market. So it's got a solid build, and as always, the iPad is very greatly solid build device, but maybe it's time for a new design though. You're getting a bit tired of it. In terms of display, the display itself is amazing. So maybe because the previous generations of the iPad had a so horrible display, this looks better, but no, this reproduces sRGB color gamut to the 100%, and it's a very accurate display, very sharp, very, say, comfortable to the eyes in the same sense. That sounds very not right to the, not tying to each other, but it's very sharp and very smooth at the same time. It's a very good display. The laminated display and the anti-reflective coating works very well too. We were very happy with the quality of the display. And in terms of quality, the speaker is another thing that the iPad has its quality on. So the stereo speaker produces a great sound. If you're in a small room, comparatively smaller room, you'll be able to fill up the room only with the speakers, and the bass coming out of the speakers, as always from the iPads, is amazing. And so it is with this. When you connect your earphones to the earphone jack on top, it always generates a great sound. So sound here is nevertheless a question. And the camera is upgraded. Although I'm not a big fan of taking photos with the tablets, I think it looks ridiculous. It takes decent photos. However, just like any other Apple products, it suffers in the low lighting conditions, and one generation behind of a camera is always a disappointment compared to the iPhone, of course. And just a little heads up, Apple is the only big manufacturer, I think, that doesn't serve with the built-in beauty shot mode kind of thing. Of course, there are apps, but there are plenty of apps, but native support would be appreciated a lot better. In terms of the performances, it's not the latest chipset. It's got the A8 processor when there is an A8X and its bigger sibling iPad Air 2. That's triple core, and this guy's got a dual core. And triple core is known to have about 50% better performances than the dual core one built in this specific model. But the A8 and the 2 GB of RAM run everything smooth and fine. Everything is just fine, including that multitasking function that is aided by the upgraded 2 GB of RAM. It was a pleasure to use, but we have seen some glitches from the iOS 9, which we're going to talk into later. Since it's got the, not the latest, but fairly late TIS processor and the specs, we presume that this is going to be able to last for years for the iOS upgrades. So with that power shift, there is a little heat on the right-hand side corner here, which is not my favorite because that's exactly where your hand lies on when you're holding it with your right hand. So it's not exactly my favorite part of the features, but it's nothing serious to impact your overall experiences, but it's not pleasing nevertheless. On the software side, iOS 9 is a mixed bag, I would say. It serves with the advanced features like the split multitasking and promises for the better performance, but we were not exactly feeling it that way. Especially the expectations for the better performances were shattered by the multitasking panel, which lags somehow. And this is not to be seen on any other Apple devices that was the latest in the market and were shipped with the operating system that they suggested and installed initially. That was a bit of a surprise. There are some bugs here and there, and it's not my favorite part of the, it's not the favorite OS that I've seen, but as it was since the iOS 7, the initial release, iOS 9 point releases, 9.0 point releases, this is running 9.0.1. Is never a stable release, and neither is this one. Control Center was the feature that was introduced since the iOS 7, but really it needs to allow user to edit or add or remove the shortcuts here. iPhone's got 4, why should iPad have 2? And why should a timer be here? I don't see myself using a timer on my iPad that often to be stuck inside forcefully inside a Control Center, so that should be added, but it's gonna take years, literally. That's what Apple does all the time. The battery time next is solid. The battery time is very solid. That lasted for 2 days of the normal usage. I can't give you the exact times, I'm sorry, but it lasted good for 2 days. This is a Wi-Fi model, so the LTE model might be different, but we were totally fine with the battery life. It is known to have a smaller battery than the iPad mini 3, but that upgraded chipset and everything runs just fairly fine with that amount of the battery built inside. The power management, I would say, is terrific. So as a conclusion, iPad mini 4 is by no question a great mini tablet and a worthy upgrade, even if you're coming just from the last generation, because the iPad mini 3 was such a big disappointment. The prices seem a little bit stiff for what it offers, but that's generic Apple pricing, so it's nothing spectacular. It's something to complain about, but it's never heard. Well, because you and we all keep on buying it anyway. No matter what, it still is a reliable, enjoyable, and perhaps the best little tablet on the market, so it's highly suggested, as always the iPads are. Maybe I'm a too big fan of an iPads, but that's true. iPad mini, including the whole series of the iPad, is just a good tablet. So, rundowns on the pros and cons. Pros, it's really thin and incredibly light, and it's got the way better screen than any other previous generation, and the sound quality is just simply amazing. And the A8 processor and 2 GB of RAM should help it last for a long time through the notorious iOS upgrades that's going to trash your iPads. And it's got a solid battery life. And now to the cons. Although I mentioned everything in the review, the cons first one is that there's a heat on the right side bottom, and the iOS 9 slutters. It's got a sluggish multitasking panel, not my favorite. And also the split multitasking panel doesn't really seem useful in the smallest screen. That's a physical limitation that you have to face, but again, I still count it as a cons. And when I will be allowed to edit the Control Center there, not my favorite. And camera suffers in low lighting conditions. And is it time for Apple to include some kind of beauty shot thing for selfies? I'm looking forward to that. I don't see myself taking selfie with this big tablet, but sure, it'd be nice. Photo booth isn't enough, it's just for fun. So that was iPad mini 4, and we hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys later with another golden thing from Apple, maybe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys later.